is it actually possible to get started with no money?
Well, if you have a deal and you have no list of buyers, then you can't do anything with it. So you really need a list of buyers first if you're wholesaling or depending on what you're doing, so that you know what they're looking for. Then you go shopping and you find what they need. But you got to know what you're doing first. So it all starts with knowledge. And I've done a ton of deals where I had the deal and then I had investors that would come along and they would put up all the money. So you have to have, one of three things, right? You either need to have the deal, you need to have the money, or you need to have the expertise and the knowledge to be able to execute on something. And then you bring everything else together. So you don't even need a deal or the money. You just need to know how to do something with it when it comes along.
If you want to become a commercial real estate investor, this is the video you should watch. After watching this video, you won't ever think about it the same way. Greg Dickerson is here to share his amazing knowledge about how to put commercial real estate deals together, whether you're starting with zero or if you got a couple of $1 million in the bank. So if you're ready to get in the big boy world of commercial real estate, you know what you need to do. You need to simply stand by. Let's get it. Hello, guys. This is Ty, aka the Flip Man. And today we have a very, very special guest. Someone I only discovered on Sunday, I think. Just doing some research on some commercial real estate, and Greg pops up. I actually did a search on Build to Suit, and BTS, and he was one of the videos that I watched. And when I watched one video, I started watching a ton of them before I knew I was buying a course. I've already listened to the land development course, but enough of me yapping. I have Greg Dickerson here. He has his own YouTube channel. Tons of information, tons of it, from real estate investing to crypto to stock market, just tons of information. So how's it going, Greg?
Doing great, Ty. Thanks for having me. And yeah, number one, I think we have the same barber. And number two, Sunday is a great day to discover, right? So divine appointment. So God put us together for a reason. And, I've been following you a lot longer. I came across you a couple of years ago, and I love what you do. And I want to thank you for everything you do. You're helping a ton of people and impacting lives. And there's no greater calling than that. So thank you for what you do.
Oh, like really? No, I didn't know that part. I know you sort of mentioned it in the email we had, but I thought you just may have consumed some of the content once I sent you the link or whatever. So, wow, man, we could have made this connection a long time ago. But wow, I really appreciate that compliment, man. I try my best to give others an opportunity to help just simply feed their families, man, and other options as far as generating income. So we'll get right into it, Greg, man. This may be some people's first introduction to you. So if you could just give us a little background, maybe even before real estate, how you got started with everything.
Yeah, so I'm a natural born entrepreneur. So I grew up in Pensacola, Florida, not too far from you. And as a young kid, if I wanted something, my dad, who was he was in the military. None of my family were entrepreneurs, business people at all. My dad was career military. My mom was worked for Blue Cross Blue Shield her entire life. So if I wanted something, my dad would not give it to me. He'd say, well, you need to go figure out how to make money to get it. So literally at, 5th grade, 6th grade, I'd be knocking on doors. Hey, my name's Greg. Ty, what do you need done? I need to make some money. I'll rake your yard, wash your car, cut your grass, whatever you need. Walk your dog. I don't care. Babysit your kids. You don't have kids, I'll get you some kids. So, I mean, that was me, just a natural born salesman, natural born entrepreneur. Of course, that was cultivated and encouraged by my dad, teaching me that if there's something you want, figure out a way to create what you need to go get it. And if there's a problem, solve it. He said, go around, if people's grass is long or if it's covered with pine needles, you knock on their door and see if they want it taken care of. So where there's a problem, there's an opportunity. So I learned those things at a very young age. I was not a good student. I graduated high school, went in the Navy right out of high school and did 4 years, got out of the Navy, had a couple of jobs, kind of banged around between restaurants and construction. And in 1997, I moved to the Outer Banks of North Carolina. That's where the Wright brothers took off and flight originated. And I started a little remodeling handyman company. That was 1997, 29 years ago. I was 29 years old and I didn't have anything. I didn't have any money, didn't have any credit. Didn't have any backers, no mentors, no courses, no nothing. I just had worked, obviously in the Navy, and I was a ship serviceman in the Navy, so we took care of the stores and retail and all that. So I had some business training in the Navy in terms of accounting and numbers and stuff like that. And I worked in restaurants and construction after the military, so I got some training in restaurants because I was a manager at a high level for Lone Star Steakhouses. So I was running multiple stores. So I learned how to be a leader, delegator, motivator. I learned how to squeeze a nickel out of a penny in the restaurants, and I learned how to run numbers. The other thing that I learned that environment, working in a corporate restaurant environment, taught me was the power of educating yourself, because we were required to read a certain number of books that the company used as their management philosophy, and we can get into that later, and how to run a business and things like that. It was a number of books that I read, and that opened my eyes, and that's where I learned how to become an effective manager, and then ultimately effective leader, and then eventually an entrepreneur. So I started that company in 1997, a little remodeling handyman company. And my first year in sales, I did $250,000. By my seventh year, it was a $30 million building company. I started 12 other companies along the way, different types of businesses, built them all up, sold them all off, reinvested all the profits along the way into real estate. My first deal was a lot flip. Didn't even know anything about real estate as a business, but did a lot flip. Then started building spec houses, then started developing land, then started developing commercial and multifamily and all of that. And, just hundreds of millions of dollars in real estate deals, all from that one lot flip, educating myself, pouring into myself, and using the profits that I made in the business to reinvest back in these other assets along the way. So that is what my philosophy is that you want to generate businesses that create cash flow to invest in other assets. It's one thing to make $1 million. It's another to keep it, grow it, protect it, so that you have it for generations and beyond. So that's me in a nutshell.
All right, boom. All right. Just a starting off question here, and I'm taking it from the approach. Most people that are listening here, it may be their first introduction to commercial real estate. Some of the things I want to personally know, but just to start off, is it actually possible to get started with no money?
Absolutely.
Please expound.
Yeah. So you're talking commercial real estate specifically, but any real estate, whether it's land, whatever, it doesn't start with the money. It starts with the knowledge. You got to have the knowledge first. You need to know what you're doing. You need to know your market, know the type of business model that you're after, and then be able to find a good opportunity within that business model. And then all of that starts with, the buyer, right? So the whole debate in the business, if you're a wholesaler, if you're an investor, whatever, is, what's more powerful, the deal or, the money? Well, if you have a deal and you have no list of buyers, then you can't do anything with it. So you really need a list of buyers first, if you're wholesaling or depending on what you're doing, so that you know what they're looking for. Then you go shopping and you find what they need. But you got to know what you're doing first. So it all starts with knowledge. And I've done a ton of deals where I had the deal, and then I had investors that would come along and they would put up all the money. So you have to have, one of three things, right? You either need to have the deal, you need to have the money, or you need to have the expertise and the knowledge to be able to execute on something. And then you bring everything else together. So you don't even need a deal or the money. You just need to know how to do something with it when it comes along. Or you have the deal and then you bring the money and the expertise that goes along with it or something. Or you have the money and then you bring the other parts. So, if you want to get into the actual details of how that works, it depends on what, different type of a, commercial deal that you're talking about in terms of how to do a deal with no money.
I got you. Now, and I'll come back to that on another part of it. But now, one of the things, like I said, I consumed a lot of your content on Sunday. I was literally watching the games on Sunday. Who played Dallas and San Francisco, and then Philly and the Giants. So in that, what is that? About 6 hours. I was consuming your content.
Awesome.
Basically. And actually, at that point, I had already I was listening to the course. I had already, before that started that morning, I had consumed really all day of you, basically. So anyway, you mentioned, and it was a friend of yours or someone that you knew that did a $10 million assignment fee.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is a friend of mine, and this was, back before 2009 when things were hot and heavy, and he had a relationship with a family that owned a large, it was a 100-acre farm up in Northern Virginia, a very sought-after area, a lot of development going on, and all the builders were hungry. So yeah, he had a relationship with the family. They gave him an option to buy the property. So he didn't put any money up. He just had a contract to buy it. He took that contract, sold it to a builder for $10 million. Now, again, he knew who the builders were. He knew what the land's potential was, and he had a relationship with this property owner. So he didn't put any money out of his pocket. And I think this was less than 6 months from the time he contracted the land to the time that he was paid by the builder for his assignment fee on that property. And I've done tons of assignments, like that. And, again, you just need to know where the opportunities are. You get a contract to purchase it. You don't have to put any money up. You don't even need to put $1 down. A lot of people think you have to put deposits down as consideration. You don't. You just need to have a contract to buy it. Ty's got a piece of property. I'm going to buy it. I'll pay you, in 60 days, 90 days, whatever it is. But you want to make sure that you do have a back end that that's going to perform on that contract so that you're not tying stuff up without, any kind of an exit. And, just like my first lot flip, that deal was brought to me by a realtor. He came to me and said, "Hey, I've got this property. You put up the money. I'll do everything else. We'll be able to buy it and flip it in less than 30 days. And we'll make, 30 grand. And I was like, "You can do that?" He said, "Yeah." So that's what we did. He took care of everything. I put up all the money and we split it and made 15 grand a piece in 30 days. So, I mean, I do these deals all day long, every day.
So to go back to being able to lock up a deal, and I know it's all, like you say, it depends on the property, depends on the situation. Just a simple example of being able to lock up, we'll say, a $4 million property, but you're not putting up 40 grand in earnest money or whatever. How would you structure something like that?
So if it's raw land, and you can do this with a building, you can do it with a business, you can do it with all kinds of things. But let's just talk about raw land. So you're going to want to put a contract to purchase it for, $4 million. Now, this contract is going to have a 90-day feasibility period. So in that 90 days, you're going to determine, do the numbers work? Can I do what I want to do? Let's say you want to make mobile home parks, or you want to make, single family homes, or you want to do a multifamily property or whatever. You're going to need some time to decide, is that even possible in this county, city, whatever region you're doing the business in, city or county? What's it going to take? What do the numbers look like? Is it even feasible? So you have a 90-day free look period. So at the end of the 90 days, then you say, okay, now I've decided to go into, my due diligence period and my entitlement period. After that initial feasibility period of 90 days, then you want to give yourself whatever time it takes, generally a year to 2 years, to get that project fully entitled and approved before you close on it. So after that initial 90 days, if you feel like, hey, this project works and you want to wholesale it, then you go, assign the contract is what a wholesale is. You're just assigning a contract. Then you go find, whoever your end buyer is, and you assign it at that point, so you don't have to go any further. But generally after that initial 90 days, then you got to put a little something down to keep going, to assure the seller that you're serious. And even if it's a $4 million property, I might only put, $10,000 or $25,000 down. That's it. Because what I do is I tell them, I'm going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a $4 million property to get whatever I want to get done approved. So that's extremely valuable. And if I don't close, I'm going to give you all that work product. So that's my consideration. So that's how I tie up large, expensive pieces of land with little to no money. And if you don't have a $10,000 or $25,000, but you have the expertise, then you can go get that from somebody, borrow somebody, get a partner, get a private lender, whatever, that'll loan you the money to be able to do that. I've got a client that I'm working with in Columbus that's done that with his property. He bought the raw land. He borrowed the money from private investors to do the entitlement phase. And now he's getting ready to go vertical on 154 units. His video is on my YouTube channel. I've got another client that played for the New York Giants. He's retired. He's a record holder in the NFL, played in the Super Bowl with the Giants. And he's doing his first project, ground up development on some family land. And we've taken him through the whole process. And I'm helping him secure other pieces of land using this exact system. And I've used them, my entire career. So number one, you never close on the land until you get it approved, entitled, fully permitted. That's for raw land. Number two, make sure you know who your end buyer is before you tie land up. If you're going to wholesale it, if you're going to assign that contract. So know who the builders are that are looking for land, know who the investors are that are looking for land, and, know who the developers are that are looking for land, and, tie it up, get that 90-day free look period so you can make sure it works. Then you can assign it, or go borrow the money and take it through the entitlement process. And then you can just get it entitled and then flip it and, make a whole bunch more money. But that's going to take you a year, 6 months, year, 2 years, depending on where you are.
So whenever you're making your offer, just to go back to that, whenever you're making your offer, and I guess you could do sometimes like you could do it verbally, but in most cases we do a letter of intent. Whenever you're making that offer, so in that initial letter of intent, you're ironing out those details of, hey, I'm going to have my 90-day feasibility period, then a due diligence period, then boom. Now we were talking about land, so you say you can do it regardless of what type of real estate it is. But what if it's only like a property that's $350,000, right? We'll just say it's a multifamily building, 8 units or whatever. What's more like in the sense of the owner, like, dang, you don't have access to $350,000. I don't need to be talking to you or whatever. So how would you go about that? Because a lot of that type of commercial real estate is out there also, but it could be still a substantial payday. You may get it for $350, but it may be worth $500 or whatever. So that may be a $50,000 to $75,000 assignment fee or something, like if we're talking about wholesaling or whatever. So
okay. Yeah. So you can still use the same process. And by the way, those contracts that I just mentioned, the LOI and the contract of purchase, are in the course. So you can download those resources. You got them.
I already checked them out.
Yeah. It takes you through the process of how I do that. So with an existing building, same thing. So, now multifamily was very competitive for a while. It still kind of is. And, most people were putting hard earnest money from day one and closing quick and all that. You don't want to do that. What you want to do is you want to find a motivated seller that is, either burned out or they're just losing whatever it is, and approach them the same way and say, look, I need 45, 60, 90 days to, do some due diligence on this property. So you get yourself, a due diligence period of 90 days if you can. And then from that point on is when you would have to put some earnest money up and then, go forward to the closing from there. On an existing building, you're going to have to go to closing at some point. Somebody will. But you want to give yourself as long of a period as you can to do your due diligence, which is you want to inspect the property. You want to see every room. You want to, audit the leases. You want to, monitor the property, make sure you're comfortable with who's there, verify all the collections and vacancies, and, go into every single room. Whenever you're looking at a multifamily property, make sure you go into every single room, open every single door, even if it's a storage closet. You want to vet that property completely and walk through it and look at it. But same process, and sellers know that. They know you need to verify the income and this, that, and the other in order to value the property, because commercial properties, multifamily, they're all valued on the income they can produce, unless they have some unique aspects about their location and they're sitting on land that's exponentially more valuable than the income it generates. Maybe you can expand it, make it bigger. It's in a great location, whatever, those types of things. But you use the same approach. And what you're doing is you're building relationships with your sellers. And you say, look, I need some time to, I've got to vet everything, do my inspections, do my due diligence, all those types of things. So I need a period of time where I can, do all this before I decide if I'm going to move forward. And, they may want some money down. And again, if they do, then find somebody that will put that earnest money up for you. And then, you can pay them off later. You can make them a partner, whatever you want to do. But you want to keep that to a minimum for at least the first 90 days. And if you build a good relationship with that seller, generally they're going to work with you, especially if they're motivated. They just want to get the thing sold.
In most cases, would you say never? I'm not going to say never, but, and I was using a smaller priced piece of commercial real estate, 90 days due diligence, a minimum. And I know, and you're saying even more so, feasibility 90, then due diligence 90.
Yeah, so that's really on development. So raw land, you got to have feasibility. Is it going to work? Can I do what I want to do? Then you go into your, entitlement process, your due diligence process, where you're actually, working through the rest of the process. That's your entitlement process. On an existing building, due diligence is you're vetting the income, you're inspecting the property, doing all those types of things. And if there's a, value add play, you're calculating that and trying to figure out if it works. And then also you can do it on a finance deal. So every seller that you talk to with an existing property and land, ask them if they're willing to finance. You want to have multiple offers. You want to be a transaction engineer. So you want to have multiple exits, you want to have multiple buyers, and you want to be able to make multiple different types of offers to where, the sellers can participate. And you'd be surprised how many people would be willing to finance you for no money down at all. You just take the property over and give them payments till paid. no interest, no money down. Say, okay, you want, $350,000. Here's how I'll pay you. I'll pay you this out over 5 years. I'll pay it out over 10 years, or whatever you think the property can support. You take that over, and then you can do what you need to do, then flip it, or at least you just get control of it so you have more time.
Wow. Question, like, we made an offer, a partner of mine, we made an offer on a property, and he just only wants to lease the property before what we're going to do for, which I'll tell you later after this. But we made an offer of like, okay, we're trying to lease like 4 acres, right? And so we made an offer of $12,000 a month, and he rejected it. He was like, "This is too low. I don't think this is going to work. Thank you for your time." And so I replied back to him, because he's in Spain right now. I replied back to him by email, like, "Hey, we want to buy the property." He forced me to make an offer because he wouldn't give me a price or what he wanted. So we made an offer. Obviously, we'll get it for $1 if we can, but we thought $12,000 a month, with a 5-year lease was good or whatever. So, but I replied back to him, "Hey, we still want to buy the property. What's your number to create a win-win?" But he hadn't replied back. It's been 2 days ago now. So what would you do? I know we probably have to get him on the phone, but what would you do in that situation? I'm pretty sure you've experienced that, where, "Hey, you're all too low. You guys are wasting my time, blah, blah, blah." How would you handle a situation like that?
Yeah. So eventually you're going to get a number out of them. So, a lot of people, especially more sophisticated people, are going to make you negotiate with yourself. So if you've approached them out of the blue and they don't have it for sale, 9 times out of 10, they're going to say, "Well, you called me, you tell me what it's worth, or you tell me what you can pay." So you put a number together like you did, then you're going to get a response, or no response at all. So if he's in Spain traveling, whatever, it could just be a delay. But eventually he's going to come back around to you if he wants to sell, if he's motivated to sell at all.
Well, one caveat. Okay, so the entire facility is like 13 acres, 2 buildings, 26,000 square feet combined buildings. But we only just wanted a portion of it, like a little over 4 acres of it, for the purpose of what we're going to do with it. And so that's why, we made a portion of the offer of what he wanted, which he made it clear he would separate the property and lease, separately. So we made an offer based on the portion that we want to use, which is just basically the just the raw land part of it. And so in essence, how would you handle that? Because I thought we were not quite at a third of 40,000, but we're not taking any of the buildings. I think that's more valuable than leasing the land in most cases. So
yeah, so you just have to wait to see what his response is, and then whatever he comes back with, then you say, "Well, how did you come to that number?"
Okay.
So, and then he can explain to you what his thought process is. Then you can see if there's a way, put something together based on that. But you always have to, once you make the offer, once they respond, you'll get an idea of what they're thinking. Because at that point you can say, "Well, look, I made you an offer. This is what I think it's worth. Where are you at?" And then, you're either negotiating with yourself up to the point to where you're just done, or they're going to give you an answer. And that, the more sophisticated they are, the more they're going to make you negotiate with yourself until they give you an answer. So that's all they're doing. So you just got to be patient. You got to wait them out. And eventually if they want to move it, they're going to come back around. They're going to say, "Look, I'll do it for $15,000 a month." Then that either works for you or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, you can say, "Well, how did you come up with that number?" So that's the question I always ask. Whenever somebody says, "I want $1 million. Well, how did you come up with that?" "Well, there's this property over here. There's this over there." So you can kind of see what they're thinking. Then you can help bring them back down to earth if that's where they need to be, or they might be right and you might be off. So, asking good questions, asking deeper questions, that's the path to a win-win for everybody. And, the other thing, I never use win-win. I just say, "What's it going to take to get the deal done?" That's what I always use.
I got you. All right. Okay, let's go on the broker side of this. Like sometimes you'll reach out to a broker and they won't call you back. So what do you say? A voicemail, an email you saying? I'm like, are they trying to sell the property or not? I don't get when someone, I know they think about tire kickers and all this stuff, but you never know who's on the other end of that call or email.
Yeah, commercial brokers. Yeah, they're famous for not returning phone calls. So, a lot of it approaches 100% of the game. So you have to come across in a way that you're serious and unscripted when you're calling a commercial broker. And it's, hey, this is Greg Dickerson, Dickerson International, calling about your property on, Main Street over there. Very interested. Give me a call back. Then I leave my number. So I keep it short, simple. I don't go into a bunch of detail. But commercial brokers, they get 100 calls a day and most people aren't qualified. So that's kind of why it works that way. So to break through the clutter, you just got to keep it real simple. Whatever your company is, hey, this is Ty with, Ty Development Company. Very interested in this property. Please call me back.
Okay. All right.
Keep it simple.
A follow-up question on those is that when you do talk to them, they'll go, it seems like they're interviewing you. Like, what other properties do you own? Blah, which I know how to answer. It's no big deal to me. But for people that's brand new, how would you handle that if they have no history? Well, we'll just say we know they don't have any history in commercial real estate. They may have some in residential, but just assume they don't have any. Someone's skipping residential, going straight to commercial, but you have no history in it. How would you handle that basic interview that they're trying to take you through as far as your history of properties you've owned, properties you developed, and so on?
So language is important and an understanding of the business is important. I never get that question. So they can tell if you know what you're doing right out of the gate by how you present, how you talk, and what you're asking for. So generally, if you're calling them about a property, so most of them are listed somewhere. So you can find them on LoopNet, MLS, something like that. So the information's out there. So if you're calling, they're thinking, well, why are you calling me? There's information here, because you should only be calling to, make an offer, find out what's going on, whatever. So the questions you're asking is going to tell them whether or not you know what you're doing. And if you don't, you need to educate yourself. There's a lot of resources out there to educate yourself on commercial real estate, land, all those things, my courses, there's stuff online. You need to know the language of the business, and you need to ask good questions. So when you're calling a broker and they get on the phone, they're going to start asking you about you if you sound like you don't know what you're doing. So first thing is sound like you know what you're doing. Hey, calling about the building over here, and then you get them on the phone. Yeah, I see you're asking $1 million. What's going on with this? How long has the tenant been there? What's, is there any opportunity to, add on, whatever. So you ask good quality questions where they're not going to ask you what you're doing or whatever. But then eventually that question could come up and you can say, I've got properties all over, I've got significant holdings in commercial. I buy and sell. You can say whatever you want to say. If you've got property, hey, I've got properties all over. I've got a significant portfolio. I buy and sell properties. I'm a developer. So you kind of answer the question that way. So if you don't have any properties and you're just buying and selling, if you're assigning it, whatever it is, just tell them that, I'm buying and selling properties. I don't currently hold them. I'm looking for opportunities to add value and sell. That's what I do. I'm an opportunistic investor. So you kind of answer them that way. Or you just, if you do have properties, you say, hey, I've got a significant portfolio. This one is a potential candidate for that portfolio. So you want to kind of use the language that will clue a broker in that you know what you're talking about.
I got you. All right. Sounding like it goes a long way.
That's the key.
All right. So, just to get into contracts, like just with on the residential side, I give away the one-page contract. People use it all over the country or whatever. And they are often asking me, well, do you have a commercial contract? And my reply is, you really don't want to do it that way. You can find standard stuff out there, and it works because I've used them before. But on the contract side of it, like just going back to that $350,000 property, right? Just because of the price point, do you always need an attorney to prepare your agreements for commercial real estate?
So I always recommend you use an attorney for commercial real estate contracts, just because commercial can be a little bit different. And there's some things that you need to look at. But if you're just assigning the contract and that's what you're looking to do, then understand who your buyers are and see if they have contracts they want you to use. So you are an acquisition specialist. So you're not a wholesaler. So when you're in the commercial world, more sophisticated world, you're not a wholesaler, whatever. You're an acquisition specialist. So your job is to go out and find acquisitions for me, for developers, for investors that are looking for properties. I've got contracts and I've got LOIs that my attorneys have put together. Those ones in my course were put together by my attorneys. I've spent, hundreds of thousands on those documents. So in a commercial transaction, yes, you want to have, a document that's been put together by an attorney to be able to use, because that end buyer is going to be beholden to that contract, and that could kill the deal. If they see something in that contract they don't like, that could just kill your opportunity if that's what you're doing. Now, if you are buying, you want the advice of an attorney in a commercial deal, because there's just all kinds of things that can trip you up, and you want to make sure you've got the proper amount of language in there and time and access and things like that. And there are some standard commercial contracts that some realtor associations put out. So you can use some of those, but I always use an attorney for commercial contracts.
All right. Just to go back to the feasibility period or study, do you actually go ahead and pay a firm to do one, or you just need to do your own due diligence because you know what to look for, you know the tools and resources out there to access, that you can do it yourself and you're not going to pay 7, 10, 15 grand for a feasibility study? Well, how do you normally handle that in-house, or how would you recommend it to someone else? Because that could be a significant taker for someone starting out or whatever. What would you recommend on that?
Yeah. So back to the contract, you can pay an attorney one time. So you can, have an attorney put together your contract one time, and then you can use that over and over, especially if you're doing assignments. Each building might be specific. So same thing in this process. So for, vacant land, due diligence, or feasibility process, I generally do it myself. And I have engineers that I work with in the different markets I'm in, where I'll send them, a plat, and just kind of have them do a little sketch for me, or just kind of take a look at it and see if what I'm thinking is going to work. So I'll run it by my engineers, but you can hire an engineer to do a feasibility study for you. So you can say, look, I've got this property. I want to build 300 units on it. Can you take a look at it and do a quick, feasibility study and tell me if what I'm thinking is right? So they'll research the zoning code. They'll do, all the different things that I talk about, in the courses that you need to do in order to determine what you can do with that property. So they'll do it all for you. But yeah, it's going to cost you $3,000, $5,000, $10,000, depending on what you're looking at. So I'll do all of that myself, to get to the point to where I'm comfortable that I can do what I want to do, or my team will do it, whatever. And then once I'm past that point, then you turn it over to the engineers to start the actual entitlement process and doing the drawings and all that.
All right. So not to confuse the feasibility process or time frame with due diligence, if you just could explain the difference.
So feasibility is, that's just back of the envelope, quick feasibility, where you're trying to determine what are the utilities to the property. What's the zoning code tell me? Can I get the units I want to get, or the size building I want to get? How much is it going to cost roughly? So if I want to build a building, how much is that really going to cost? What kind of income can I derive? So you're just doing some back of the envelope calculations. You're talking to zoning, planning, utilities to see if all that's available. You're talking environmental, if there's any environmental concerns. Maybe you run it by an engineer to see if what you're thinking is going to work. So that's feasibility. Is it even feasible? Will this even come close to working? Then when you get into the entitlement and the due diligence process, that's where you're actually doing your due diligence. You're going through the entitlement process. You're getting surveys done. You're getting your environmental reports done. You're working through the entitlement process. So, in development, it's the entitlement process. With an existing building, it's due diligence. So that's your checklist where you're verifying. So due diligence is verifying the assumptions of the information of the property. How many units, the leases, the income it generates, scrubbing all that against, the tax returns and the P&Ls that they're giving you. It's called the trailing T13, the trailing 13 months of income and expenses on commercial properties. So you want to get all the financial information you can on existing property and do your due diligence, do your homework in terms of verifying all that information, verifying the conditions of the site. So in development with raw land, the due diligence is you're verifying site conditions. You're out there, you're walking, you're doing, the environmental reports, the natural habitat reports, indigenous species reports, all that kind of stuff, depending on where you're at. It might be turtles or birds or whatever, that you got to look for, animals on the property. So that's part of the due diligence feasibility process. And, they're not the same. Feasibility is, not feasibility, due diligence, entitlement process. Entitlement is the ability to do what you want to do, the permits. That means you're entitled now to build a building on this property. You got all your permits, all your approvals. That's entitlement. The due diligence process of the entitlement process is actually verifying conditions on the ground. That's what I call, verifying. If they say it has water capacity, verifying the pressure. Do you have the pressure to serve the building for water? Verifying utilities. They say you have access. Well, how far from the site is it? So, that's all part of that that due diligence that you're doing in the entitlement process versus, is this even feasible? Will this even work based on quick calculations?
I got you. So whenever something like if you purchase a property, we'll just say self-storage as an example, and whatever the zoning is for a particular market, it already says that it will allow self-storage. Whenever you get ready to construct that property, going through the permitting, there shouldn't be any, and I guess that's the entitlement. There shouldn't be any issues like another layer of zoning that needs to go with it because it already, according to the county or city code, it will allow it.
So yeah, so if it's already allowed by use, that's a by right use. That means it's allowed by right because of the code. And then you'll have conditional use permits, special use permits that you can get, or a zoning amendment, zoning change, or, new zoning, rezoning, whatever, if it doesn't. But if it's an allowable use, then yes, they're telling you you can build this, but you don't know based on that is, like, it may say you can build 18 units an acre. Okay, well, that's great. That means you can get approved for that, but doesn't mean it will fit on the property. So there's a lot of conditions, that you have to go through to be able to determine how many units can you actually get on the property. Sure, I'm entitled to build that, but by zoning, by right, but can I actually get it? Or you want to build a 10,000 square foot building on an acre. That usually works in some areas, but it may or may not, depending on your utility situation. You have water and sewer. What's your lot coverage requirements? What's your floor area ratios? What's your height restrictions, parking? All these different things come into play. What's the topography of the land? What's the layout going to look like? That's going to determine your footprint, how much capacity the site has, and how many units you can ultimately get. Stormwater management's a big one. So there's a lot of variables. So just because it says you can do 18 units an acre doesn't mean you're going to get 18 units on each acre of that property, because some of them aren't going to be buildable. You have open space, all those kinds of things.
Got you. Well, what would you say, just by sometimes getting a use permit, I think the way it's titled, that could, or just changing the zoning period, which I know can be a little bit more difficult and time consuming, could be worth millions.
Oh yeah.
Once you get that changed, it now becomes a $500,000 property that goes to $5 million.
Exactly. So that's a conditional use, special use, or a complete zoning change. So if it's agricultural and you can't do anything with it, and then you get it zoned for something that, is only available in that area. So liquor store or something, there's only so many of them you can build. You get a special use permit for it and they're not issuing anymore. That's valuable. Or if it's a bowling alley, or if it's a casino, whatever. So yeah, that's extremely valuable, and especially for land that's zoned. Let's say it's just zoned residential, 2 units an acre or something, or just single family, you can build one, you get it rezoned to multifamily. So then that becomes more valuable than just a single lot for a house. It could be 10 acres, but all you can build on it's maybe 1 or 2 houses. Now you get it rezoned. So yeah, that brings a lot more value to it. So what you're doing is kind of like flipping houses. Okay. When you're flipping houses, you are an opportunistic developer that's doing value add. You're adding value to that property by doing something. You're making it nicer. You're adding a bedroom, whatever it is, you're adding value, and you're opportunistic about that. Development's the same way, whether it's a piece of land that is just one chunk and you just do a boundary line adjustment, just a simple minor subdivision that doesn't require a big approval process. And you take, 100 acre and chop it up into 10 acre parcels, or you take 10 acre parcels and chop it up into 1 acre parcels and do nothing else. You've created more value that way because it's worth more in small pieces than it is in a big piece, generally, in like a rural area, especially, that kind of thing. And then if you're in a city and, or area that's, in demand, and, kind of the growth is emerging to that path, and you've got a 20 acre parcel that's agricultural and you get it zoned for mixed use, that's extremely valuable. And all you got to do is take it through the entitlement process, the paperwork process. Even just getting it rezoned and nothing else can be extremely valuable.
Wow. So do you hire a would it be called a zoning attorney or entitlement attorney, or what would that? Because I heard you mention that. I can't remember.
Yeah, land use attorney. In some cases, you might need a land use attorney if it's very complicated, but generally, if it's something that the city and the county is on board with and they're okay with it and they're going to, help you along the path, then it's just a matter of going through the process, especially if you've got other parcels that have gone through the process.
Okay, so I know each city, each county is set up differently. So you just start out in zoning and permitting, see who you need to talk to, what process you need to go through or whatever. And I know it's going to be, some will just be just as simple as asking and they like, oh yeah, we can do that. Or then some, and maybe 2 or 3 years later, even though it can be done, it may take that long. So what would
Well,
be
and
the
you never want
first
to take
step on that?
anybody's word for it. So yeah, it starts there at the city county level. You just say, hey, I've got this land over here. What can I do with it? Can I get it rezoned? You know, what is it? What does the appetite look like for that? What's the climate for that? How do they receive that? You know, will they allow that? So you can kind of get their feedback. And then when somebody tells you yes or no, say, can you point me to the section of the code where it kind of says what you're talking about? So I've got that. So you always want to have the code reference of whatever they're telling you, whether it's building, whether it's, entitlements, whatever it is, so that you can refer back to that, and then go through the process yourself. Engineers will help you. So if you have a good relationship with engineers that are doing work, say, hey, I want to rezone this property over here. They've done these types of things, so they can tell you what the chances are, what you got to go through, time frame, cost, process, all of that. And then if you don't want to deal with it, you hire a land use attorney and you let them do it all. So you can use consultants to do everything for you if you don't want to do it yourself. But you definitely want to learn what you're doing and kind of dig into some of these and ask questions. And having the planning and zoning people on your side, having a good relationship with them is extremely valuable, because they'll help you understand the code, what you can do with different parcels, and kind of help you brainstorm some ideas. And they'll tell you what the current planning board, what their vision is. And a lot of places have a master plan, master development plan for the area, things like that. They pay a lot of money to develop these plans of how they want the area to develop. So, you got to find out if there's one of those in place that's kind of govern what you can do and the different development zones that they have and things like that. So yeah, it can be a process. And the other thing too, is the reason I say you never want to buy land till you're done. You can be downzoned, rezoned, moratoriums. I mean, they can stop you in your tracks anywhere along the way, in this process. So you just want to make sure you don't risk too much unless you're pretty sure that you're going to get what you want to get, done in terms of spending money, getting your approvals, or, tying land up, or even buying a piece of land.
Okay. What would be the best, just on the wholesale tip again, what would be the best way to build a commercial buyers list of commercial investors?
So look for who's doing deals in your market, same way you do for residential. So you check the, court property transfers, talk to property managers, find out who owns commercial property, who's looking for, deals and opportunities. From a development standpoint, same thing. Who's the builders in the area that are building and looking for inventory? Who's the commercial developers that are building and looking for projects and things like that? So, it's basically relationship driven, transaction driven. You can see the transactions are being done. And then the brokers, you do want to build relationship with brokers and talk to them and, get information, of who they have that's looking for different things. Engineers, architects, they'll tell you what they're looking for, where. So you can talk to them, and they'll also tell you who their clients are that are looking for projects and where. So same process you'd use in residential.
I got you. All right. What would be some of the best tools out there, Greg, you would think people can use to help along on the commercial side of it? What's some of the best tools out there?
So LoopNet's a good one. So LoopNet, a lot of people say that LoopNet's where deals go to die. Not always. Sometimes there's good deals on LoopNet. And, what that means is brokers will put listings up there and leave them just to generate leads. So you can learn a lot by listings on LoopNet. So you want to go in, look at properties like you're interested in, and read the offering memorandums. Sign up for the broker's emails. That's another way brokers will take you serious. If you're on their list, and you're in their database, when you call them up, say, hey, I got this property you sent me on, XYZ Elm Street. Start talking to them about the property. Hey, tell me about the property. Why are they selling it? What's the income look like? What do you think the potential is? Can it do that? And that's how you kind of learn the business, by talking to other people. So LoopNet is a huge resource. Commercial broker websites in your area, that's a good resource. And again, get these offering memorandums of the property, and read through them, because they're going to tell you everything about the property, the market, the demographics, what an investor or developer will be looking for in a property. That's what these offering memorandums say. And then brokers love to talk about that. Once you've got that information, then they'll get on the phone with you. That's really the best way to get a call back. Hey, downloaded this offering memorandum on 123 Elm Street. Just want to ask you a couple of questions. then that whole,
Okay.
what's your portfolio? That conversation is not going to come up because they know that you're solid when you ask a question like that. Hey, I already got your brochure. Well, it's offering memorandum is what it's called. I got your offering memorandum. Just wanted to ask you a couple of questions.
Yeah, I guess a lot of times, like you said, even though they may have the property advertised for something, but that you may personally may have a different use for it, which would be the value add. As it sits, it doesn't make sense for probably the current or previous use or whatever. But what you have or what you think of one of your investors may be interested in may be the value because of what they're going to change it into, a possibility of what their expectations would be on that. Do you use Crexy at all?
Crexy can be good. That's more of an auction type thing, but you can look at a lot of properties, see what's out there, and again, look at the offering memorandums and who's doing deals, and build relationships with those brokers. So yeah, Crexy is a good one. The MLS is a good one. LoopNet. If you really want to get into property intelligence, there's a software called Reonomy. Have you seen that?
Oh, I've had a subscription for about 5 years now. So,
yeah. Reonomy is a good one. That's property intelligence, and again, they're just pulling tax database, those types of things, but they drill down into corporate ownership and things like that. So those are the main ones there, and obviously the tax database, that's a good one too, where you can learn a lot about properties and things like that.
Yeah, Reonomy is a great place. You can actually get phone numbers, even which most of these properties, well, a lot of them are in entities, some type of business entity. It'll drill down to, who all's involved. Not saying it will always be right, but most of the time it's right or whatever. So, but it's a little pricey for most people, but it's really good at getting owner information and obviously, like you say, the history of properties. All right. About to end this up, Greg. I know you're a busy man. Couple more questions. Do you take referrals from non-students?
Referral? What do you mean?
Like a deal, like somebody might think it's a deal. Well, I guess let me back up. I'm saying it backwards. What's your current buy box as far as what you're looking for? I know you do a lot of different things, but so what's your buy box like? I know you might do this and that, but what gets your attention the most right now? I guess a better way of asking it.
Yeah. Okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah. So me personally, I have a very, specific geographic region that I do deals in, basically from North Carolina to DC. That's kind of my corridor. And, what I'm really focusing on right now is large tracts of land for builders, in my area, the national home builders. So, I'm not out looking for deals all day, every day. I've got some things I'm working on. That's kind of my business model, that type of thing. So, me personally, I'm not really, looking for anything outside of my corridor that, and I know pretty much everything is available because I've been doing this for, 20 years, this specific business model as a developer in my area. But, there are people like me out there looking for different things. And that's the question that you want to ask is, so here's how you really learn the business. When you find somebody that is looking for deals, you want to ask them, what are you looking for? Where? And the most important question is why? Why do you want that there? So you can learn how they think, what it is that they're looking for. Like me, what I just said, I like large tracts of lands in my region because there's national and regional home builders that are starving for lots, for buildable lots or entitled property that it's already ready to go. They can come in and just do the horizontal and the vertical because they can control that process. So I already know what that appetite is. So I'm very specific in what I'm looking for there. And I know the areas where I can get it done the quickest with the least amount of resistance from the municipalities, where they're not going to fight me on it. One other thing before I forget, when you're talking to sellers, the most valuable question you can ask a seller when you're done, and number one, you always want to be honest with them. Just tell them what you're doing. Hey, if you're new, hey, this is my first deal. Will you please help me get started? Will you finance me? I want to just break in. I want to be where you are. I want to own these properties like you. So, people will help you when you're honest with them. But the last question you ever want to ask every seller you talk to is, do you have any other property you'd like to sell? Or do you know anybody who has any other property they'd like to sell? Doesn't matter who you're talking to, land, houses, commercial. Do you have any other property you'd like to sell? Or do you know anybody else who has any property they'd like to sell? And by the way, there's people looking for businesses too. So you can do this same thing with businesses. You can assign contracts for businesses or put buyers and sellers together in businesses for a fee. So, most people you talk to that are into commercial real estate or own a bunch of land, they're going to have some businesses or a business that you can help them get rid of.
What just on that really quick on businesses, what of course there are all types of all types,
That's a
different
whole
industries.
nother video. Maybe we'll do another
That's a
video
whole
on buying
nother
and selling
video.
businesses.
If you had one that say, "Oh, I would be interested in that," or not per se, maybe so but a lot of investors are like, "Yeah, I like that." It may be quote unquote boring, as Cody Sanchez says, but the cash flow is great, and it's a lower headache business, I guess you would say. What would
Well,
you
that's what
say
you look
would be
for.
one or
Businesses
two?
where the cash flow is great and they're low headache. So, I
Yeah.
mean, cleaning businesses, service-based businesses. Me personally, I'm a co-founder of a tech startup right now. So the ones you can build the most money with the fast are tech companies, right? Software as a service, any kind of a tech, IT kind of a business. Artificial intelligence is huge, but that's a different animal. But, at the street level, you want to stay away from restaurants, retail, those types of things. The most valuable businesses are reoccurring revenue businesses: house cleaning, landscaping, window cleaning, power washing. Roofing can be good, but there's a component to it there. Even like remodeling handyman companies. The other ones are easier because they take less talent, less skill. They're easier to build. Any of those types of companies: HVAC, plumbing, electrical, service-based businesses that you can charge reoccurring revenue, or they're going to have reoccurring revenue because of the nature of what type of business it is. So those are the ones that you want to look at as far as, brick and mortar, offline type businesses. And then I'll tell you, the number one business model in the world is something I teach people with right now as well: taking your expertise and selling it online to other people. Courses, coaching, like I do. I've got, my courses, mastermind coaching programs. I mean, that's the most profitable, scalable business that the world has ever known. And people need the information. So you're making good money. You're helping people make good money. And, I've built this business that I'm doing, my coaching and education business, as a example to show other people what they can do and how they can do it. And it can be extremely profitable. People making, 6-7 figures easy in that business in very fast, time frame, especially if you have very specific knowledge and you can help people solve a big problem. Teach them real estate, teach them what you teach them.
Yeah. I get that question sometimes. I know you're going to always have naysayers like, well, if you're making all this money in real estate, why are you selling a course? I was like, so my answer normally is, if someone would pay you to spell your name over and over again, would you turn down that money? Because me explaining wholesaling, mainly houses, is just like me spelling my name. So it's another income stream. Are you going to turn down that income stream if you can put that together, right? And at the end of the day, it's enough money out here for everybody 100 times over. 100 times over. So creating competition, don't worry about that, because in reality, most people are not going to do anything with the information anyway. It just is what it is. But yeah, you just said it, like, why not? Then you're helping people. I take the approach similar to yours, is that I give away everything you really need to know. It's just, if you want to get into my time or you want a more step-by-step structure, then yeah, there's a cost for it. So, but yeah, totally agree.
Well, and it's more for them than it is for you. So, so people have to invest, right? So it's just like a house. You want to flip a house and make $100,000, you got to buy the house. The money has to come from somewhere. Nobody's going to give it to you and then show you how to do it, and then you go make $100,000 and walk away. So, if you want to play in the game, if you want to be a player, and that whole thing, well, if you're making so much, why are you teaching it? There comes a point in your life. So I'm 55, and I'm after impact. And like I said at the beginning of the show, there's no higher calling than passing along the knowledge, wisdom, and experience that you've gained over the years to other people and watching it transform their lives. I mean, I've got clients that, one couple, they were flipping houses for 6 years, never made more than a couple $100,000. I took them to 1.3 million in 1 year. 1 year. And in fact, one phone call, the first phone call I had, showed them how to do it. And then I just kind of, coached them along the way. And I've got people that I showed them how to do the coaching business, took them from zero to $1 million their first year in a coaching and education business, teaching people how to do short-term rentals. Yeah, ground up. So when people pay, they pay attention. When people invest, they're going to do the work and they're going to take action. And the more they invest, the more action they're going to take and more successful they're going to become. And, you know, so that's one reason there. And then the value of what you're teaching. You know, if I told you, you know, I had a house that's worth 50 grand, I'll give it to you for 10. You're going to do that deal?
In most cases, yes.
All day long.
Yeah, all day
right?
long.
So what if I told you, you know, I'm going to give you a house for 100,000 and you pay me 10?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, you do that all day
Yes.
long. So why would you have an objection to paying $5,000 if it can make you 50, or $10,000 if it can make you 100, or
Yes.
$100,000 or $125,000 if it can make you $1 million?
Yes.
But not just this year, for every year the rest of your life.
Yeah.
How much would you pay for that? And the fact that you wouldn't pay for that is what you just said. You're not going to do it anyways. So next, you know, and
yeah, it's like when people pay for college, you know, like, unless you're going into something medical, that's the only thing about guaranteed. I would say probably engineering second. Getting a law degree doesn't guarantee money, but you know, you still got to go through
tech
that process.
and IT, those are the big ones. Computer programmers, developers. Yeah, that's a big.
But when you get the history degrees like I got, marketing, sociology, there's no guarantee that's going to make you a living, right? And people do it all the time. Millions of people do it over the years or whatever, and don't even question it. So, but
now
you
look,
can learn
I had to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in my education and in my businesses. And, you know, coaching my people, bringing consultants into the business and helping, you know, other businesses I was working with. So I paid professional consultants. I've got, you know, courses, seminars, you know, books. I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then all the mistakes I made along the way that cost me millions of dollars. So that's kind of what you're passing along. And, you know, like I said, there is a subset of people that just don't get it and they'll never get it. But the ones that do, that you can really help and impact, and then to watch them go out and do it, and you're just passing that along, you know, it's just, I mean, there just is no more fulfilling thing that you can do. And after a point, deals just get old. You know, once you've done it, once you've arrived and you're liquid, okay, and you understand what I mean by liquid, once you're there, deals don't excite you anymore. You can always do deals. You can always build companies, and it still excites me. I'm building companies. I'm doing deals. But what excites me more than anything else is what I've done in every single one of my companies over the last 20 years, which is help people figure out why they were put on this planet, why God created them, help them untap the potential they didn't even know they had, and just rocket from there. That is exciting. That's why people coach. That's why people teach. That's why people educate, because you have a passion for it, and because you can. And there aren't too many people that can, you know, and you are a great teacher in the way you explain things and break it down. You help people. That's huge, and it's needed, and it's valuable, and you're not creating competition, man. There's more deals than all of us will ever be able to do.
Ever. And what one of the things for me is my day might not be going well, and I may read a DM, somebody send me a text. I've never even talked to them before. Send me a photo of a check and just say thank you or whatever. It's nothing better than that, man. I've never even talked to them before. I'm talking about, they didn't even buy anything. They just watched some of the videos I have on YouTube or wherever. And, you know, I don't know how to explain it, you know, so why not, you know, but anyway, but I'm an entrepreneur first. So I'm going to seize on opportunity because, as you said, I know how to do it. And for me, it's fun, you know. When I discovered the internet in 1998, when a chick I was dating at the time, I thought it was the most amazing thing, because you mean to tell me I could put something out here and people would buy it or whatever from anywhere in the world? That still amazes me, right? And so the flip man stuff came out of more of a hobby that turned into something I never thought it would be or whatever, by me just sharing what I know about real estate. So, but Greg, I had you almost an hour, man. I really appreciate it. You did so many nuggets here. I'm gonna clip this up in so many ways and use it to help others. But tell them how to reach you. Let them know how they can learn more and what you have to offer.
Yeah. Everything is on gregdickerson.com. So you can go there, check it all out. I've got a YouTube channel. I put out content every day with, you know, playlists on all the different things we talked about: residential, commercial, mindset, leadership, businesses, all kinds of stuff. So gregdickerson.com, go check it out.
Boom. Guys, we really, really appreciate Greg sharing his time. Maybe we can do something like this again in the future. Didn't know he knew I existed, which is amazing. But I really appreciate it again, Greg, man. And as I always like to say, I'll see you guys on the flip side.
Text me and I'll text you back. Text me and I'll text you back. Text me and I'll text you back. You text me then I'll text you back. Text me then I'll text you back. TikTok, you don't stop. I will help you make your paper stack. Where you at? Where you at? Where you at? Where you at now? 205-964-5243. Now you know. 205-964-5243. Now you know.